communist who's become mayor of New York. The father of the Southport attacker has told the public inquiry into the murders that he's desperately sorry and accepts a share of responsibility. And in the last few minutes, the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and the Environment Secretary, Ed Miliband, have arrived for the Earthshot Awards in Brazil. They'll shortly be joined by Prince William. You are watching the press preview. A first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. It's time to see what's making the headlines with The Sun's political editor, Jack Elsom, and journalist and broadcaster, Jenny Kleeman. They'll be with us from now until just before midnight. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. The fury and embarrassment over two more accidental prisoner releases makes lead story in The Guardian, where it says Justice Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister David Lammy is now under mounting pressure over the way the issue has been handled. As the manhunt continues, the eye too reflects on the heat Mr Lammy is facing. The Express calls it the shocking release of an Algerian sex attack convict, while the Mirror sums it up simply with "not again." The grilling of Mr Lammy in the Commons by Labour over what the paper calls the latest jail bungle is a front page lead for the Metro. While the Mail says that police now fear that Labour's so-called soft policy on justice will lead to a crime wave. The Telegraph reports that drivers of electric vehicles are to be made to pay per mile to drive when Chancellor Rachel Reeves unveils her budget. In the FT, the boss of Nvidia, the world's most valuable company, warns that China will beat the US in the artificial intelligence race because it has lower energy costs and looser regulations. Jack's paper, The Sun, reveals that Meghan Markle is to return to movie making 8 years after she last appeared on screen. And the Star celebrates news that a campaign by the paper has resulted in Vodafone giving UK Forces personnel free mobile data to mark Remembrance Day. Well, welcome then to Jack and Jenny. Good to see you both. Let us start with the front page of The Guardian and our lead story, and one that I know you've both been covering keenly, and that is that David Lammy under pressure for two, not one, but two prisoners being mistakenly free. Jenny?
There's a lot to this story. First of all, there is the question about how this could happen. What was going on in Wandsworth prison that two prisoners in a week were accidentally released? Wandsworth prison already had a really high-profile problem in 2023 when Daniel Khalif managed to escape from there, a prison that was already under a lot of scrutiny at a time when the government had made promises about extra checks and balances on prisoners being released after the Hadish Kabatu was accidentally released a week ago. Was it a week ago or 2 weeks ago?
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago. So not a great time for the Ministry of Justice, but particularly there is this question about Wandsworth prison, and staff have been talking, not on the record, but have been giving briefings saying that they're not surprised. It's very chaotic in there. We know that our prison system is stretched to the limit. Then there is the question of why did it take the prison 6 days to tell the Met Police that this prisoner, one of the prisoners, that they knew that he had been mistakenly released, this Algerian prisoner who's convicted of sex offences and had overstayed his visa. Very worrying on many counts. Is it because the prison didn't realise that he was at large? We don't know. But the whole question of who knew what when, why did the police only find out 6 days later? David Lammy found out last night. And then that leads to the political question of what on earth was going on during his performance in PMQs today when he was at the dispatch box and being repeatedly asked about this, which was a kind of disaster on all sides, I would say. I would say that, the questions being put to him by the Shadow Defence Secretary, James Cartledge, were not ideal in that he was being asked repeatedly about whether or not any more asylum seekers had been released. And, of course, this Algerian national was not an asylum seeker. He was somebody who'd outstayed his visa. But David Lammy very bullishly refusing to answer the question and appearing extremely outraged and insulted that the question was being put to him, when he had in his briefing notes the details of the fact that there was somebody who had been mistakenly released who shouldn't be in this country. And there's also another prisoner who has been released as well. And, I was just
But he was specifically asked about asylum seekers.
He was specifically asked about asylum seekers.
As far as we know, he didn't have any details to that
No,
effect.
and he could have said, I have not heard anything about that, but he didn't say that. It was his whole kind of position of outrage. And for me, the interesting thing is some of the details coming out today. Over 200 prisoners accidentally released in the last year. I mean, I guess that's one way of addressing the prison overcrowding crisis. But is this now acceptable and normal, that our prison service is it so incredibly stretched to the limit that we can't even keep track of whether or not prisoners are being kept within its walls when it should be? It's terrible for the government.
It's just a total farce. I mean, today has been a farce from start to finish, and it would actually be genuinely hilarious if it wasn't so serious. The fact that not only do we have 2 prisoners tonight on the run, but they are just a drop in the ocean compared to the amount of prisoners who are frequently released early, but we only find out about them not because the government are forthcoming with these details, but because of journalists like us that actually managed to expose these people. You know, when The Sun revealed Hadush Kabatu was released a couple of weeks ago, I'm not sure that information had been volunteered, and the same one today. And David Lammy, who today I think appeared totally out of his depth, the point that I think a lot of people are actually feeling quite sorry for him in the Commons chamber. But there's probably a way that he could have dealt with that. He could have said either, no, I'm not aware of any asylum seekers, or he said, I am aware that something happened at HMP Wandsworth, but, I need to establish the facts and there'll be a statement later. But the sort of almost whipped-up, staged indignation and outrage which he displayed wasn't befitting of the crisis which the prison system is clearly in. He then released a statement a few minutes later, after PMQs had wrapped up, after having refused the Speaker's request, the point of information to then give more information. He then released a statement which said, I am outraged by this. The public deserve answers he wouldn't give a few moments earlier. I have initiated and implemented the, quote, strongest checks ever in our prison system to make sure people aren't being released mistakenly. They're clearly not the strongest checks ever, because in the last week since he's implemented those checks, we've seen 2 more people from the same prison. How many more are currently out there? We don't know at the moment, and it is that lack of answers coming from the government which I think needs to be addressed, because that is why, ultimately, he's now under fire on the front page of newspapers.
Do either of you know or suspect that he was ambushed by the Shadow Defence Secretary, that he was armed with that information?
Yes, totally. They found out about 15 minutes before going into Prime Minister's questions at noon, so about 11:45, the Tories had a tip-off that this person had been released and that there would be a story coming about 45 minutes later. I think the Tories slightly bungled it by, one, saying, have any asylum seekers been released? Because we later learned this guy was not an asylum seeker. In fact, he had overstayed a legal visa back in 2020. And they also, I think, made the mistake of not just being forthright about it and saying, we know that someone has been released from HMP Wandsworth. What are you going to tell us about it? And what are you going to do about it? And when we asked the Tory spokesman afterwards, why didn't you do that? They suggested that it wouldn't be their place to do so. But I think that they might have got more out of it if actually they try not to set a clever political trap, although, tonight clearly it has worked because the Justice Secretary's on the front pages.
Yes, except, I think they just messed up, the Tories, because they then had to resort to this point of information rather than using one of the 6 questions that the person leading from the opposition side is entitled to ask and demand an answer from the person representing the government, which is what happened today. I mean, it was a missed opportunity. In better hands, they could have scored more political points. I would say the really interesting thing about all of this, I mean, there's a lot that's interesting about this, but one of the things that's so interesting is, we're here talking about 200 prisoners, well over 200 prisoners released in the last year.
And 22 a month.
And as you say, we only know about it because of journalists. But part of the reason why this was brought up in the House of Commons today is because of this obsession about foreigners and about foreigners committing crimes. And that the political point being made was, it's another asylum seeker, as if it isn't bad enough for public safety that you're having people who should be in prison. I mean, the second prisoner, there's this focus about this Algerian prisoner, rightfully so, a sex offender who should absolutely not be at large in this country. But the other person who was released was released on the day that his sentence began. So this idea that it's somehow to do with, oh, it's so complicated working out when people are supposed to be released from prison, it's not in his case. You know, he was convicted. He should have gone to prison. It's very straightforward. But because the politicisation of everything to do with criminal justice at the moment is all to do with it's asylum seekers, it's migrants, it's people who live at odds with our way of life, that is the prism through which we're looking at this, rather than the very serious public safety issue, which is that people who should be in prison are not because of completely farcical mistakes.
Jack, do you agree with that appraisal? I'm just reading the details about William Smith. He's a 35-year-old, described as white, bald and clean-shaven, known as Billy, was sentenced to 45 months for multiple fraud offences on the day he was accidentally freed.
Yeah, it's bonkers. And we learned that I think he'd been already in custody in that prison, and he was sentenced via video link from HMP Wandsworth.
And then freed.
And then freed in a matter of hours later. Whether I think there's been some reporting that might have been a mix-up with the surname. Obviously, Smith is a very common surname. But, I mean, that is the sort of script that would be rejected from a BBC sitcom, because it is just so beggars belief, and it seems so blindingly obvious that you would go about checking it, especially in the climate that we've mentioned of such scrutiny on prisoners being released early. You would have thought that in the past few weeks, the prison guards would be dotting I's and crossing T's to make sure everything is copper-bottomed. But, you know, the signs, especially in Wandsworth, have been there for some time. You know, there was that report released after the Daniel Khalif disaster showing that it's totally stretched in that prison. And that's why I do have some sympathy with the current government, because clearly these problems in the prison system have stretched back a long time. But you know what? They asked for this job, they won an election saying they were going to fix this mess, and now the public will be expecting they do it. We don't care how outraged and appalled David Lammy is. We want to know what he's going to do about it, because clearly the checks he put in place after Hadoush Kabati was released, they're currently not good enough.
But those beefed-up checks were peculiar to asylum seekers, which this gentleman wasn't. So it doesn't necessarily follow that the checks aren't working.
There is a technical point here, I think, which is that in both these cases it seems that they were mistakenly released and they were being transferred from the prison service to immigration removals. And so there is clearly a disconnect here when it comes to prisoners being released who are earmarked for deportation. Why currently do the immigration removal service not seem to be able to either pick these people up properly, or they're being released, you know, and not giving... There is clearly a disconnect in terms of that specific route. But you're right. I mean, like, clearly it extends much more beyond asylum seekers, and it's just to do with prisoners in general, which at the moment, the prison system doesn't look like it's a very, very fit state.
OK. Jack and Jenny, thank you very much for the moment. We did get through all the papers, although we didn't reference them by name, but we touched on every single point in every single front page and inside as well. Thank you very much for the moment. Coming up, the Telegraph warns drivers will be hit by a pay-per-mile tax in the Chancellor's autumn budget.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
I'm Cordelia Lynch, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Bangkok.
These slums, once gripped by fear and death.
There is far less bloodshed now, but it hasn't gone away.
Who's asking you to kill?
The police will give me the orders, and after I kill the target, I throw the gun away.
We try our best to uncover and unpick a fast-changing and deeply complex region.
These large waterways provided an excellent source of body disposal.
This is the Buriganga River, where victims who'd allegedly been shot dead were dumped.
Sheikh Hasina, how confident are you that she will stand trial?
She will stand trial, there's no doubt about that.
We're going to take you to the very heart of a criminal network, going undercover inside Southeast Asia's scam centres for the very first time.
We won't have any problems with police, it's okay.
Just seen Imran Khan leave, and as we understand it, he's just been shot in the leg.
They have decided that the only way they'll allow elections is if I'm inside jail or killed.
Sky News get the full story first.
Chinese vessels start encircling the boat we're on, blocking its path.
The Chinese are now deploying water cannons, firing it directly towards our boat. We've discovered doctors across Delhi dishing out pills like this, claiming they will provide a lifelong cure for homosexuality.
Rohingya people fleeing an escalating civil war.
The situation here in Cox's is desperate. An already insecure place does feel a lot more precarious.
There's always more to the news than a headline. We want to discover, to delve a little deeper, to find out what's really going on. Explanation, analysis, the people at the heart of every story. I'm Neil Patterson, and this is the Sky News Daily Podcast. So, by the end, we'll hopefully all understand what's going on in the world just that little better. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
I'm Stephen Murphy, and I'm Sky's Ireland correspondent based here in Dublin.
The waters of Ireland and Britain should be home to great white sharks.
If there are great white sharks in this area, there's no reason they wouldn't come here to feed. It's basically a buffet on a beach. This could be not only a record-breaking storm, but potentially the most dangerous storm ever to hit Ireland.
Welcome back. You are watching the press preview. Still with me, the Sun's political editor, Jack Elsom, and journalist and broadcaster, Jenny Kleeman. Let's take a look at the FT front page and picture centre of it. We have the new mayor-elect of New York. Oh, we've got the wrong picture. That isn't.
David Lammy's got a promotion.
Exactly.
He's been fired already.
A new job. Yes. There is a new mayor of New York,
yes,
though, and it's the person that everybody kind of knew, but it's still quite incredible that he has won it because he is, the youngest mayor for 100 years, the first Muslim mayor of New York. He didn't have much in the way of opposition, but nonetheless, the fact that he's won is quite remarkable and quite incredible for the Democrats, who had a kind of string of election victories, won landslides in the gubernatorial races in Virginia and New Jersey. It's the sort of thing that happens 9 months into a presidency of the opposition. But nonetheless, the thing that is the kind of big turning point is for the Democrats is to have a candidate that people are really getting behind, who is focusing on how difficult life is when things are so unaffordable, and that he was campaigning on a ticket of, I am going to make the cost of living easier for ordinary New Yorkers, the immigrants that power this city. He's unapologetically pro-immigrant and talking about free childcare, free buses, subsidised grocery stores, talking the kind of language that kind of work, the sort of people who might vote for Donald Trump would like to hear. And it's interesting, this, because he is setting himself up as a kind of the biggest opposition for Trump. And he may end up being quite a useful foil for Donald Trump, because Donald Trump will be able to build him up as some sort of socialist boogeyman to frighten people in states where they would never vote for somebody as left-wing as Mamdani and say, look what the Democrats are standing for, look what he represents in New York. But it's very interesting to watch whether or not he'll be able to fulfil these promises and the interaction between him and Trump going forward.
Yes. Trump's already called him a communist,
yes.
hasn't he? He's labelled him a communist. Let's move to the Daily Telegraph. And, well, it's not definitely going to be in the budget. Nobody knows what's definitely going to be in the budget, but the
Maybe
suggestion...
Jack knows. Jack knows a lot of inside stuff.
I'm not even sure the Chancellor knows at the moment. Someone in the Treasury told me that she's considering literally about 150 different measures. Civil service all put to her. And then you sort of go along and see which ones can make the numbers add up and which one's popular and which one's going to be unpopular. But it does seem that either way, we're going to have a smorgasbord of tax hikes. Whether it is going to be a load of little tax hikes or whether it's going to be one nuclear button income tax, manifesto-busting tax hike remains to be seen. But I think we do know is going to happen.
Electric vehicle
It's on electric vehicles. And I'm duty-bound to point out that the Sun did actually report this a few weeks ago. The Telegraph seemed to have put it on their front page with a few more details. The plans we understand the Chancellor is currently considering is a paper-mile tax on electric cars. It might be about 3p per mile. Kicks in, according to the Telegraph, in 2028. The conundrum the Chancellor currently has is that the revenues they get from fuel duty are falling because they're encouraging more people, obviously, to drive electric cars. And electric cars are clearly exempt from fuel duty because they don't use fuel. So what she's trying to do now is think, OK, how are we going to raise some more money for people driving? And it's going to fall on electric vehicles. But there is obviously a bit of a tussle with this because the government wants people to buy electric vehicles, and lots of electric vehicle manufacturers have actual mandated targets about the amount they need to produce, otherwise they get big fines. Most economists will tell you that you tax things that you want to discourage and you don't tax things you want to encourage. And so I think that people will find this a bit weird that Rachel Reeves is going to be doing it, but I think she's just so desperate now for cash that she's casting around for everything, and clearly electric vehicle drivers have been told to pay up.
It does seem unfair as an electric car driver. Not very happy. I mean, it's going to cost an average extra £250 a year.
Yeah, it's quite a lot.
It's quite a lot of money. Yeah. And they told us to drive electric cars.
They did indeed.
For the moment, Jenny and Jack, thank you very much. Coming up next on Sky News at 11, despite tighter rules, 2 prisoners are on the run tonight, released by mistake from Wandsworth Prison in south-west London.
What might happen if Russia attacked the UK?
This is clearly an enormous show of force.
It is definitely out of the ordinary.
We ran a war game with former ministers back in the hot seat.
Ben Wallace.
Amber Rudd.
Jack Straw.
It's the kind of war game that's genuinely tested inside government.
The Russians are signalling that there may be an attack.
Russia knows our weaknesses, but do you? I'm Deborah Haynes. From Sky News and Tortoise, this is The War Game. Listen wherever you get your podcast.